post-traumatic recession disorder or something. I think it's almost,
post-traumatic scarcity.
Yeah, scarcity disorder. It's almost like, gosh, is it going to drop to that? Is that going to happen again?
It's like I'm following a bunch of Yodas. They're not Darth Vaders. I'm not against them. They're here to help me. I'm supposed to pull something from this. I'm supposed to use this to feed my journey. Hey, Belinda, welcome to the show. So happy to have you on.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
So just for our audience, tell everyone a little bit about what you do and Own Your Money and everything you kind of, you're doing online right now, because I know I've seen you a bit on the gram. So just share with our audience what you've been up to.
Sure. So yes, the gram is my favorite of the platforms at this point. And I'm at Own Your Money everywhere. And so I've been doing this now for 15 years. So some call me a dinosaur, some call me a pro. I've been through a lot in terms of, I had started out in the personal finance space back in 2007. So kind of lived through first recession, ended up starting the business right before that. Although my friends and family did a bit of an intervention in the first 3 months of my business, because they're like, why are you leaving a nice 6-figure CPA job to become an entrepreneur? And it wasn't nearly as sexy as it is now. 15 years later,
Right.
I went down the personal finance route. Although it was helpful when no one else was talking about this, because I was literally on the 5 o'clock news in Boston the day of the federal bailout, right? Helping people with money and budgeting and all of the personal finance stuff that they needed. So I did that for 12 years, wrote a book called Self-Worth to Net Worth, and had a TV show at one time in Boston, a radio show, like all the things. And then I got to 2019 and I was kind of tired of talking about personal finance, and kind of my viewpoint on life is much more expansive, right? It doesn't like contract to just say like spend less than you earn. It's like, hey, what are your goals for your life and your family? And how can money be a tool to make them happen? So it was much more like, how can you be making more money? And when I would coach entrepreneurs and consult with them behind the scenes, we were getting big results, like the freelance video producer who we took from 190 grand to $2.4 million in 3.5 years, like big results consulting. And it was really fun for me to feel like I could help them tap into this unlimited potential that we have as entrepreneurs to make money. So January 2019 shifted the whole boat to go down the small business finance route. And now it's really more about our Cash Flow CEO program, which is about helping experts and coaches, especially those on track for 100K, to be able to sustainably scale their revenue and profits. Like, we barely learn about money at all, particularly not how to make sure that we keep more of what we're earning, that we have profit without it being a happy accident at the end of the day, right? So it's really about, how do you create those up-leveled money systems, money strategies, and learn how to be the CEO so that you can have that roadmap to 2 to 5x your business. And I believe it's possible, but sometimes it's hard for us to see ourselves, and it helps to have some direction to get that clarity. So I love it.
I love that you say, I love that you say happy accident, because it's when you start getting intentional about your numbers and about your money and about your goals and planning, that's when you start seeing the results come. I find that when it's a happy accident, then you're praying for a happy accident after another. Like you're just hoping it happens again, but you have no idea why it happened in the first place. And you never want to be, out of control. Like you don't want to not be in control of that happening. But you mentioned something interesting with that, and go ahead.
I just said it's very stressful. Like I think that entrepreneurs live with way too much stress underlying everything they do in their business. And it brings a level of desperation to every sales call, every opportunity, because you feel like it's like never enough. I need to make more money, But do you? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you know what your contracted is that's going to be coming in? Like, do you know where your gaps are going to be? And it's so empowering when people have that information, and it's so stressful and confusing when they don't. So just want to add a little punctuation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned the 2008 bailout and being around during these stressful times and really kind of going all in on the education side and informing people about what was going on.
Yeah.
And we were talking about, in discussing topics for today's episode, we were actually going back and forth on the current state of affairs right now with the economy, which we're in fall of 2022. and there's a whole lot of uncertainty. There's a whole lot of fear, but they're throwing around these words like recession, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we actually unpack it, no matter what the label is, right? Recession or whatever. I love the label that you use. So could you just kind of share how you see the current, situation that we're in and what you call it, but also just how we should be looking at it?
Absolutely. So, it's almost like we're looking at the current state and almost like we've forgotten what we just lived through for the last 2.5 years, right? And we're trying to look at the current state independent of the wild ride, honestly, that we've just had since March 13th of 2020. And ironically enough, I had been talking about recession proofing your business since the beginning of that year. And I created a whole event called Recession Proof Your Business that launched 2 weeks, not even a week before the recession hit in March 2020, right? So I've studied this a lot. I've thought a lot about it. And yes, right now is considered, like, under the technical terms of 2 down quarters in a row, a recession. But what I find is that it almost matters less what we're called on a basis, like recession or not. I actually view this as more like the economy right sizing after what we went through since March of 2020. Because if you think about it, right, it was a very weird time. Like, essentially that was considered a recession, yet we had all this money flowing into us, right? Like, we had our best enrollment ever of our Cash Flow CEO program in April of 2020, because it was like, people were like, oh, yeah, you know what? I do need to get my money together. Like, I do need to create a plan, and I do want to capitalize on what's happening right now. And though so much went up and yet so much went down in 2020, right? Like, the online business has been booming because there's such a surge in online education and just tech in general online, right? Like, when Zoom or, huge tech companies need to, or like even Peloton, right?
Yeah.
So many people ramped up when everybody went home and they needed to be online. They needed to be able to do more from home. That, of course, there's going to be some economic right sizing happening now, 2 years later, as people are back out, and we don't have the influx of cash that we had from all of the loans, from all of the stimulus checks that we got, and so now it's figuring out, like, what's the new normal going to look like, right? Who do we want to be as business owners? What do we want to sell? What do we want to charge in this new normal, without needing to say, oh, I need to slash prices because it's a recession? It's like, no, you still need to figure out what's the value of what I'm delivering, right? How do I articulate, like, all of the tried and true practices still, if anything, now more than ever, need to be followed.
And that's where I think that you basically, I think that Warren Buffett quote where it's like, you don't know who's naked until the water sinks down, right? Because
Yeah.
no one's naked until the water goes down, something like that. You know what I'm talking about. So,
I do, but it's just funny to think about. Yeah. You
I
and your
know,
Warren
but like,
Buffett quotes. Isn't that the one you have next to your office too? Isn't that a Warren Buffett quote?
possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
So but what he's trying to get at is that, like, everyone's dressed until the water goes down and then you see who's naked, right? Because you can't see.
Mhm.
And what I've realized is, not only is that about money, but that's also about mindset. So you don't realize who
Mhm.
is just riding the wave of getting lucky. And then
Mhm.
when the quote unquote recession hits, the scarcity mindset just runs rampant. And I
Mhm.
saw this with COVID. I saw all
Mhm.
these business coaches who were like, charge your worth, you can do it, charge high ticket pricing, do this, do this, do this. And then COVID hits, and then it's like free trainings, free this, free that,
The
20%
desperation kicks
discounts.
in. Mhm.
Right. And it
Mhm.
was really interesting to watch. I felt like I was on the sidelines going, I'm not changing a damn thing about what I'm doing,
Mhm.
because this is I got the best advice from my father
Mhm.
ever, which was, do not apply a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Yep. Ain't that the
And I
truth?
was like, this is a temporary situation. This is a season.
Mhm.
And if I drop my prices, I have devalued my value. And to bring it back up is going to be a massive undertaking. So I
Mhm.
was like, let's just stay here and let's ride this
Mhm.
out. Now, a lot of people slashed their prices. A lot of people reacted to the
Mhm.
condition and kind of like fell victim to the wind as opposed
Yeah.
to staying sturdier in the ground.
Mhm.
Um, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs right now who are kind of feeling pulled to say, well, I want more people to take my course. I want more people to find it accessible. People can't afford me right now. So I'm going to lower my prices to make it accessible and approachable to those people, which isn't a bad intention, but I'd love your reaction to that.
Absolutely. And I feel like, our heart is always in the right place when we want to help more people. Most of us went into business not just to make money. Like, yes, we want to create an income and freedom for ourselves, but we also want to create an impact. Like, there are a lot of, if we're honest, easier ways to make the money that we're making. But we're doing it because we're so passionate about the life that we want to create, right? Like, as a quick sidebar, like, I watched my mom when I was growing up struggle, over deliver, over promise, under earn. And I think somewhere I made a vow of like, I don't want that to be my life. And I don't want that to be how we would be raising children in the future, right? I want them to be able to see earning money as a positive thing and running a business as a positive thing, not something that's going to pull time away from the family. And this is, lots of therapy and programs to get me mature enough now to realize it, because I kind of started repeating it when I didn't realize it was happening. And so second full year of business, I grossed 155,000 and I net 3,000, right? Because somewhere I was still in that's the only way to do it, right? Is to give it away, is to undercharge, is to over deliver. And what I kind of came through all of that with is like, actually, now I'm more passionate, right, about people being able to find a way to profit, right, to prioritize profit, to be able to know their numbers well enough. And in terms of the specific question, right, around like what can they do when they want to give it, is to realize, yes, you can still certainly give free information. A lot of us are doing a lot of thought shifting, belief shifting, and how to content even on the Instagram, on our stories, whether or posts, all of the above in our freebies. And it is real that when people pay, they pay attention.
Yes.
And if you just think like, if you're taking a $10 challenge versus a $1,000 course, or more like a $6,000 course or an $18,000 course, what are you going to pay more attention to? You're going to be paying more attention, and this is like real life in action, right? I'm in an $18,000 course and I've signed up for a $10 challenge. I don't watch anything on the $10 challenge. I know I kind of threw away money, but that's just the reality of it. The $18,000, I am at every single session that program includes, right? And that there is a way to be able to be altruistic and be generous, right? And to realize that there is value in your client and your customer paying you and being vested in the solution. The saying, like, there's transformation in the transaction, because people create a higher commitment. Like, we were talking about, the FinCon conference that happened recently, and I gave an example up on the screen. I'm like, if you had a $20 pair of sunglasses and a $600 pair of sunglasses, right? Which one are you going to be more committed to? And make sure that you soak every last cent of value out of the $600 pair, right? The $20 one you might throw away. If you still have them in a month, you're lucky. The $600 pair, that thing is getting its own case. Every time you take them off your eyes, they're going into the case, you're closing up the case, you're putting the case in someplace particular. And so I feel like it's actually more about using this opportunity right now to make sure that you are positioning what you do and the benefits and the transformation that you're creating as a necessity, right? You have to relate it to, how is what you're doing still an urgent need? How do we make sure that you're solving the wake up in the morning problem that people have, not the nice to have?
Yeah.
Right. And connect. And sometimes you may need to niche down to make sure that the specific audience that you want to work with has the specific problem that your program is solving. And I think sometimes in our altruistic way of wanting to serve everybody and be inclusive, we miss the boat when it comes to pricing and positioning our programs. So, yeah. I think
that like it's a mix though of the altruistic nature, but also the scarcity of, I don't want to say no to someone. If someone wants to work with me, then I should be able to say yes. It's very hard to say no to working with someone who wants to work with you, especially when you're in your early stages, because you're like, ooh, someone wants to work with me. This is exciting. And then it could be like the antithesis of the type of client you want to work with,
Yeah.
but you're just so excited to get a client, So I think that the it's going to sound so difficult to do, but my advice is also to stay true to your core values and like anchor
Mhm.
back to that too,
Mhm.
because it's going to be tempting to take the money
Mhm.
and not look at who's giving it to you or
Yeah.
what you're being asked to do for it. And I think that when you have strong core values or you have something, I call it my guiding principles.
No, I love it.
Because if you have that to go back to, you can say, well, are they going to violate our guiding principles? Like that's kind of a hard no for me. But when you
Yeah.
have something in writing, something tangible, it becomes a lot easier to draw that line in the boundary.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a lot of gray, right? Like
Yeah.
somebody can be like the ones that are so far that are not, that are against my guiding principles, or the expectations that they'll have aren't aligned with the services and the boundaries that I want to hold. But there is something, I think we all probably fell into this as we're getting our first 50K or 100K of annual revenue. We do say yes to all the opportunities, all the clients. And to some extent, you're still figuring it out. Like you're still figuring out,
Yeah.
like, oh, Shannon's
You
a
don't
great client.
know who you
Shane's not a
don't want to work with until you work with
work
someone
with
you don't
someone.
want to work with.
This is like nervous laughter because Shannon and I have both experienced this firsthand, right?
Yes.
And I want to touch on the scarcity thing for a second, right? Like at the core of, I kind of view it like two sides of the same coin, right? Is being clean on the emotions you have with money, and then the other side is the tactics and the strategy. And scarcity is real. And I think that particularly to circle back to something we chatted about earlier with the happy accident idea, it's like if you feel like it was an accident when you even got to that first 10K, you're going to be totally freaked out of the can I make it happen again? That's why when you have a plan and you have really solid offers then and price points, you have the ability to scale on top of that, right? Like what got you to 100K is probably not going to get you to 300K. And the scarcity is important to catch yourself and to realize like what's at the root of that. Like what is the belief that I feel like I'm holding on to that's having me say yes to all the things, or having me bring a level of desperation to those conversations. And to realize, like, is it that you are afraid the next client won't come? Is it afraid you're charging too much? Like when we can start to peel it apart, almost like an onion, peel off some layers. Sometimes there are a few tears along the way even. But as we can start to realize what's at work, it doesn't have to control us. And I think that when things dried up so significantly, so fast for so many people, that whole like naked idea, they were like, wow, I still do have a lot of limiting beliefs. And it's almost like, post-traumatic recession disorder or something. I think it's almost,
Post-traumatic scarcity.
yeah, scarcity disorder. It's almost like,
Yeah.
gosh, is it going to drop to that? Is that going to happen
Mhm.
again? And I am always somebody that believes that so much is possible when we, my company's called Own Your Money, right? When we own our own success, when we realize like, I don't have to be a victim to what's going on. I can actually use this as an opportunity. And I feel like it gets a little bit overplayed. Like, how can you use this as an opportunity? But I do believe that the more that you lean into, right, the opportunity, recession or not, like all the time that you lean into, where is the opportunity? What am I excited about, right? How can I be the answer to and the solution to people's problems? And I think sometimes it's like we shy away from problems, but really as entrepreneurs, the better we get at solving problems and the better we get at even solving more expensive problems, right? The ones that they're more wanting to fix and that they're feeling a greater cost from not fixing, the better off we're going to be. Right.
I
So
totally agree.
always have that choice to default to the scarcity and fear, or to instead default to the abundance and the opportunity.
And I think that, in times of wealth and abundance, it's easier to say that and to feel like you believe it. But I think that we are all tested when it's tougher times. And then you realize what your instincts are telling you to do. Like I said, that water drops and you realize, ooh, I'm not wearing a bathing suit. And and you realize that you can't hide behind it anymore. You can't vocalize it into existence like, oh, this is something deeper. What is some of your advice though on those who kind of are falling, I don't want to say victim. That's the language that comes out of my mouth, like falling victim, but those who kind of feel like they're being subjected to some of these emotions, feelings, and fears around money during a time like this. What do you say to comfort clients or comfort, audience members when they approach you about this and say, like, what can I do? I find myself, diving into these habits again,
Mm-hmm.
because it's all well to say this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they're going to say, yeah, I know that I
Mm-hmm.
have fears around money, but like, what can we do about it?
Yeah. So, it's interesting because I've been talking about money now for like 15 years. And I found pretty quickly that in the beginning, even I almost became a financial advisor, like so close. Like I had 3 offers in hand and I turned them down because what excites me more is being more this like financial therapist, like before it
Yeah.
was actually a profession, because I do find the, the, psychology behind it all so interesting, right? Because that's really
Yes.
what is at work and what controls us. And I find in our entrepreneurial space, oftentimes we have the people that are solely mindset and we have the people that are solely tactical strategy. And I really look to blend the two in a more holistic approach. And so, it's looking at like an even sourcing. What's the belief that's at work? Like, what do you actually believe about yourself? Like, what do you believe to be true that is causing you to feel a certain way?
Right.
And then if you can start to source it to the belief and then be like, oh, it's because I believe that there's never enough money, or that I can never earn enough money, or that I won't be good with money, or that rich people did something bad to earn money, to get the money that they have. If we can source the belief, and then this is a little kind of the special sauce, is to take it down a few levels to source it to what was that money story? What was it that you saw happen with your parents, with your grandparents when you were growing up that locked that in and locked it in with the mind and intelligence of a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old, that had you believe that to be true. And so if we can start to recognize, wait a second, I am not what I think. And sometimes that's tricky, right? Because
Yeah.
we have this like underlying record playing all the time. It's usually non-supportive. I call it our BS, stands for belief systems. Can I curse on here? I don't remember.
Of course.
Okay, well, good. Just making sure. I feel like I've heard it before, but it's the bullshit that we tell ourselves all the time. And if we actually take a step back and we're like, okay, well, what is it? And is it really true? And like, is it absolutely true under all circumstances? And if I take a step back, what are the instances in my own life when I know it's not true? Or like it doesn't have to be true. Like even if you're thinking like rich people did something bad to earn the money. It's like, really? Is that really true all the time? Like how many wealthy people do you know? Like one of my faves is Sarah Blakely. She's like
Yes.
self-made billionaire. Like I've hung out with her and Jesse. I did this crazy wild driveway to hell event at their house in May. And I know it was so fun. And I got to meet her again. And like they are some of the sweetest people ever. And like
They
millionaires, billionaires,
they seem, I got a sidebar on this. They seem
Mhm.
like, your normal like soccer mom who's got the kids and like she wears like the t-shirts and stuff. If I ran into her at Walmart, I would not blink an eye
You
at
come.
like
Yeah.
waiting in line with her at a store. And there's absolutely no like hierarchy in my mind of Sarah knowing she's like, you are a billionaire. I would never ever know, but it's not just how she appears, it's how she behaves.
Mhm.
It's almost like intrinsic that like she hasn't changed at all. She's still just Sarah. And
Yeah.
she's like, "Oh yeah, but I ran a company. That was kind of fun." Anyway, like
Oh yeah, we sold
she's
it for
so
$1.2
cool.
billion. But oh yeah,
Yeah.
and that is very much how she is. Like,
Yeah.
when I met her kids and they're like sitting on her lap, like it's exactly, like it looks, like they put on Instagram. I mean, maybe not exactly. They probably have help that you don't see
Yeah,
it all on
exactly.
Instagram, but who she is like is so genuine, and took pictures with all of us and just like super sweet. And and it's reminding yourself that like, right, that's right, there are very nice, very generous, wealthy people out there. What if you're one of those? And to realize that the beliefs that you have were probably caught versus taught, that kind of an idea, right? It's like the people in your life didn't necessarily tell you the thing. Sometimes they did. Like my dad used to say, we don't own stock in Con Edison. It was like his way of saying turn off the lights. And then it turns out that we did have stock in Con Edison, which was very ironic. Down the road, he had a stroke and I took over as family CFO, and we do own stock. But, a few things are actually like physically said, but most of the things are demonstrated, right?
Yeah.
It's like we see them in action. We see our parents fighting about money, and we think that more money will bring more fighting. We see like the stress around money, and we think that paying bills is stressful, right? It's usually in the things that we see in action, and then we internalize as how it must be. This can be your wake-up call. Like literally, this podcast can be that snap for you to say, wait a second, start to bring some awareness, almost like mindfulness. Sounds a little woo-woo, but it's totally true, to the things that you're telling yourself. Like just start to write everything down. If you want, DM it, put in your notes, send a picture to me, like whatever you want, but realize that you are not your thoughts, right? You're thinking these things. And it's even interesting if you, when they're around money and success, take a step back and think, well, where did that come from? So I do this inside our Cash Flow CEO program, and I'm trying to think of some of the examples, but they would like have seen their parents being a certain way, and then they would just naturally follow. And I find that either we often match or mirror, like match, do the same thing, mirror, do the exact opposite thing. And when we can start to realize like, wait a second, this isn't serving me. I have this like underlying feeling that I need to keep doing the same thing, but why do I? How could I do something different? And it took, that I mentioned my year 2 results. I had to like put on my big girl panties and decide that I was going to change the legacy of my family, that I wasn't going to be the next business owner who was making $100,000 and not taking enough home. A lot of times my 100K crew is often stuck in this like 6-figure hamster wheel. Like they're just making it and then, either they're in this group that's like has a bunch of profit, but doing everything themselves and feeling totally like stressed about and burnt out, or they have all the team and the coaches and everybody else is getting paid, but they're not. Right. And so it's like, I had to decide that I was going to change the legacy from being stuck in that forever and create something different. So then the next year, spoiler, was $250,000 revenue, and I took home 100. Because that was more of what I believe, what was possible, but I had to make some changes. I had to start charging better. I had to restructure the team. I hired another coach, so I was making money off of somebody else's time, right? And I think that it's really looking at like, how do you separate yourself from some of those beliefs and make the decision that if you are committed to the vision that you have of the impact that you want to make, we need to get the support to start to let go of some of those beliefs, because they absolutely will have you sabotage, plateau, keep yourself stuck, and keep yourself on that 6-figure hamster wheel until you really make the decision and potentially get the support to release those.
Totally. And one thing that you brought up too that made me think of this was when you hit those points of scarcity, when you feel like you're, oh, well, I'm not a billionaire, these wealthy people have something I don't. And then you also fall into traps of comparison, because now there's comparison, there's envy, there's these other things that pop up, because like I would call it kind of like a bitterness, because now you are, you're pointing out when people have more than you of anything, whether that's money, attention, time, freedom. You start going, I don't have this. And you're using other people as a benchmark and saying, I don't have what they have, and therefore I must be lesser than. You're also convincing yourself of that story. And it's especially in like a toxic cycle. If you're already feeling that way, I'm like, stay off social media and don't follow people who do what you do.
Right.
If you,
right.
One of my biggest cleanses is that, like, don't follow people who do what you do if you fall into that trap easily, and give yourself a break from time to time and just consume. My little mini hack lately was, Instagram has these favorites now.
Yeah.
So I have favorites. I have about like 15 favorites of people who make 10x what I do. And I'm like, I want them in my ear all the time, encouraging me, telling me what to do,
Love it.
giving me
Uh-huh.
advice. And I'm just going to keep my blinders on and listen to these voices. You have to be really selective about who you let into your ear and who
Completely.
you let influence you.
Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting, right? Because you started off talking about comparison, and sometimes
Right.
people have a hard time seeing people who are 10 times them because they're focused on the gap, right? I'm
Yeah.
at 1, they're at 10, they're better than me. And really,
Right.
it's like there might be some things you're better than them at, right? They just either started differently, had a different path, right? They have something that you don't have, and you have other things that they don't have. And that if you can follow them and watch them as your favorites with the context of, hey, if they could do it, I can too, right? Then you're open to the learning. If you're going to look at the favorites and be like, oh, shit, they're so much farther ahead than I am, or, oh, gosh, we started at the same time and they're already having 150,000 followers and I don't, it's all the context, because our context is decisive, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you recognize that if someone else has achieved it, great. That means that the path is already laid and you can just, take it from there, right? And start to work through that. And to recognize too, on the comparison front, that oftentimes we're comparing people's front stage to our backstage at its worst. Right.
Yeah.
And we forget all the times that we were on the front stage and rocking it, and like had that great launch or got on that great podcast or, was up on stage, and that we're comparing like apples and pomegranates. You know what I mean? And
Yeah, exactly.
so really,
Exactly.
like, how do we even take that out of the equation and just be like, how do I, with the people that I'm following, what is it that I really admire about what they're doing and about who they are? And how do I find the place of really looking at all the things that I do well, and that I can ground myself in the results that I'm creating and what I'm helping make possible, because really, as entrepreneurs, like, we are solving problems and we are ending people's suffering of what we can do. But like, if I have, I'm thinking of my students. So, like, I have somebody who is a Cash Flow CEO grad. She's a GYN doctor, and
Mhm.
no lifetime, no 2022, 2032, 2040. I am not going to be a GYN doctor. Like, I'm quite sure about this, right?
Yeah.
And yet, right, she is helping hundreds of people in her membership, and once we can get her, all of her business stuff down, she's already grown her membership by like 30% or something, and so
Mhm.
it's like we get to help the people that we can help, right? And she's going to go help moms who are trying to conceive and already pregnant and then having babies. And that's her audience. And that's amazing. Right. And she's doing things I can't do. So I can't compare myself to her, and it's to realize that, like, everyone has their thing and we get to help facilitate the people that we want to support to achieve their thing. I think it's so much of like the power of the ripple effect that we have as entrepreneurs, whether we're B2B or B2C, that we can really make happen. And we all fall into the comparison. The key is pulling yourself out, or starting to recognize when you start to go there and instead say, what can I learn from them?
Oh, definitely. And on that point, I was just thinking of the mindset of story brand, which is you have to look at them as guides, not villains.
Yes.
So it's like I'm following a bunch of Yodas. They're not Darth Vaders. I'm not against them. They're here to help me. I'm supposed to pull something from this. I'm supposed to use this to feed my journey.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't serve you and it really is negative, I'm like, then why are you following
Stop
them? Why are you
following
paying
them.
attention?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like you have to surround yourself with really good, as one of my mentors says, really positive propaganda.
Oh, yes, I love that term. And
I
it's
like
kind
that.
of like when you have your 10 favorites, they're sort of like your board of advisors.
Exactly.
You know
In
what
my
I
ear
mean?
all the time.
In your ear, yeah, and, like, let them help advise you. I know, like, you're a fan of Alex Hormozy. I catch his stuff
Yeah.
every day. I love it, and
Oh,
it's always so funny, and it's actually can get very validating when like I'm talking about something that day and then he releases a video. I'm like, oh my God, I just talked about price anchoring today. And there you are talking about price anchoring, right? Because sometimes it's like you can even use it as validation, like you're on the right track, and
strategies they use all the time. I'm like, I just suggested that. Thank you for that. Because then I'm going to share the reel and be like, it wasn't my idea. Look at this. And I just love that because it is validating, but it's confidence building too, because you start seeing people who you also start realizing that they don't have any like masterful secrets that aren't accessible to you or I. It's really just doing the small things consistently, showing up and really implementing what you're learning. There's really no like magic recipe or magic formula that some people have access to and some people don't. I think that's another mindset hack too, is kind of the, oh, well, I'm not really, I don't have access to that type of stuff. Therefore, I can't do these things. That argument just never works. Like it's a story you're telling yourself.
Yeah. I mean, and what's so kind of before we wrap up, like to remind ourselves that in our current online space, particularly because most of your listeners probably have an online presence, and most of our students have some online business that they're doing as a part of their coaching and expert practice. That along the lines of we have an unlimited ability to make money, we have an unlimited ability to make money fast and to grow a following fast. And I think that sometimes that's why Shannon and I really want you to have your money dialed in, right? Like to be able to know your numbers, to be able to have some kind of a profit plan so you know where those levers are. Because like I have one client, she basically went from 50K to 500K in a year. Another one, 0 to 100K in a year. Person I just talked to like an hour ago, he has a following of 125,000 people. When we launch his course, it's going to sell, so he went the follower route first and then he's going to monetize it. Sometimes people go the monetizing route first, but like we are a great example of you don't have to have a huge following to have a multi-six-figure business. You have to be able to serve, right? And deliver value and articulate that value and create results for clients. If you can focus on that and you can do it, we can help you price it, position it, sell it, make lots of money.
Exactly. Even me, my following is I think around 5,000 now, and when I started, it was 80.
Yeah. Well, we all started 0, right?
We all started, yeah. Well, like mine was 80, which was like family, friends, and like I took pictures of dinner and dogs, right? Like here's my puppy, here's my dinner, here's my whatever. I did not know how to use Instagram, but started using it for my business, and then again, it's just that commitment to consistency over time and showing up and delivering that type of value. So, and I know you do the same thing. So Belinda, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Just mention again where people can find you on the gram. What's your handle? And just let folks know where they can interact with you.
Awesome. So yes, Instagram is my favorite. I'm at Own Your Money. Would love it if you take a screenshot of this, tag Shannon and I, and maybe tag Keep What You Earn too as well. And that's where you'll get tips, videos, interviews, coaching, case studies, all the things. And feel free to jump in my DM and share, a takeaway that you got from listening to this. And then also I have a pay yourself calculator, because one of the biggest challenges I see people have, particularly now, is what do I need to be making so that I can actually be paying myself what I want to be paying myself now or in the future. So I created this really helpful Google sheet for you. You enter 3 numbers. You'll be able to see what do you need to estimate for taxes? What do you, how do you pay yourself what you want? And most importantly, what do you need your revenue goal to be? So that's a really helpful resource I would love to share with your listeners.
Absolutely. We'll have the links to everything in the show notes. Belinda, thank you again for hopping on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you, Shannon. Bye, everybody.